to save time and money, reduce errors, improve security, and increase automation of their banking operations. One housekeeping item, during the presentation, you will be unmuted, but we may need to mute you if there's a lot of feedback. So feel free to ask questions, but if you need any assistance or have questions and want to enter them in the chat box, please feel free to do so. After the presentation, we will also open up the lines and have a Q&A session. And we will be sending out this presentation to you after the webinar. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Tim Kahn, and we will start our webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Good morning, everyone. Nice to have you all with us. As I've seen the folks that have registered, we have a mix of folks that already are using the eBanking suite and some that this is brand new. So I'll do my best to not only try to go slow and make sure those of you that are new pick up what it's about, but those of you that are experienced with it, please bear with me. But if you have questions on some questions you've had pending, please feel free to jump in with those as well. So we'll deal with both groups pretty well. Let me get started. I'm going to be showing some slides, but then also we'll be actually demoing the software. So the history of our company goes back a number of years. We've been involved in electronic banking for quite a bit of time. Our staff is very experienced in this area, so we're there to provide that support to you when you get encountering those difficult electronic banking questions and features and functionality that you and your staff or your management is looking to implement. So we've installed the product at a number of customers today in SL, both in SL and AX. As you're going to see, it's very tightly integrated with the product, very active with Microsoft on many levels. We've been honored with the President's Club Award for the last 10 years running, which gives an indication of the trust and confidence that both our partners like SSI and our customers have in us as a company. So let's go over and take a look at what we're going to talk about. So for those of you new to the product is a suite of modules, the 5 of them you can see there. Actually, the product gets installed. You have all the modules available, but there's an option to unlock them or license them. So it's very, very easy to add or enhance your solution to include the new modules. So we're going to take them one at a time. At the end, we'll talk about licensing and cost and that kind of thing as well. So let's get started with Positive Pay, what that's about. For those of you that don't know, Positive Pay has to do with preventing check fraud. So when you go and print your checks and send mail your checks out to the bank, then what we do is create a file, a Positive Pay file that gets sent to the bank. The bank then has it on file and therefore can then verify when a check gets presented for clearing that check is valid because you've sent them the information, that the check number, the check name, the name on the check, and the amount. And as you can see, checks are by far the most fraudulent area of fraud committed in electronic payments, and so checks are very important to be prevented, protected. Let's go some of the features of our solution. Again, as I mentioned, it's for check fraud avoidance. The big issue about Positive Pay is that the formats are very unique by bank. In fact, many banks have many different formats. We provide those to you at absolutely no charge. There's no programming required. We have hundreds of them available. And if you need another one, we can actually get it back to you generally within 5 business days. So if there's a format that we do not have, it's very easy to get a hold of it. We protect both your AP and payroll checks. Some of the formats require some nuances about account and company. Sometimes you can have multiple accounts or multiple companies in a file. Sometimes you cannot. Our formats take all of that into account. In terms of transmitting the file to the bank, that can be either done through a browser. Some of you, if you're already using it, probably are familiar with bank websites where you can go in and log in and upload a file to the bank. That's one common method. Or we can integrate with an FTP session, such as the file gets created, an FTP session occurs automatically. Does that file transfer protocol, uploads it to the bank. Our files can be archived, so you get a complete history of all the files that have gone to the bank, and we can put security on the solution. As you're going to see, it's very tightly integrated with SL, and I'm going to show that now. We'll take a look at how it looks in the product. So everybody should be able to see a screen with a green background, and this is SL 2015. We'll talk about it. We do support SL back to 6.5 on forward, so no matter what version you're running of SL, the suite is available. The features that I'm showing here are typically available all the way back to those other versions. So the first thing I'm going to just take a look at the file formats area. Well, before I even mention that, this is the eBanking suite is installed within the financial module right alongside of your other standard financial modules. Again, it's tightly integrated using the same user interface, etc. So your users actually will not know that it's a third-party product versus an out-of-the-box product. So I'm going to go over here to file formats. This is where we manage all our formats for both the EFT side, wire transfer side, and positive pay. So on this tab, we have a list of a number of formats, and as you can see, cover a number of them. So for instance, many banks will have multiple formats. You can see Bank of America, they've acquired a number of banks over the course of their history, and each one may have a slightly different format. So it's a simple matter of finding your bank here and checking off the bank in the format, and you're really off and running. That's as simple as it is. Again, if it's not here, we provide it to you at no charge. To process the positive pay, there's very little setup. You do have to set up your paying accounts. I won't go into that just for time's sake. But we go over here into AP processes, the AP create and send. This means we're going to create a file and we're going to send it to the bank. So we manage the EFT and Wire Plus here, but we have the positive pay. The top area of this screen shows you those files that have been sent to the bank or about to send to the bank, and for each one it shows the SL batches that we're processing. So just walk through the flow. If you wanted to send a file to the bank, you click New eBanking File. I'm just going to check off a check batch. This would be a batch that has been printed, and you've presumably got the checks prepared to mail. You do want to send the file pretty soon, right after the checks have been printed and mailed. You don't want to have a gap of time. Simply, you would hit OK and accept. That's now created a pending record with a file. It's set to be create and send, and you hit begin processing. Simple as that. At this point, the system is going through, picking up those checks in that file, generating the positive pay file. And in this case, I believe we've got it set up to launch the PNC website. This is a browser type interface. Again, as I mentioned, this could have launched an FTP session to send it to the PNC server, but at this point, you'd simply do the login here and upload the file to the bank. When that's done, there's a keep process at the end, much like your check printing. So you do a keep, and basically that tells you that confirms that you feel that the file successfully went to the bank. At that point, the process is done. So it's just a couple of mouse clicks, as you can see, and now those checks that you printed are now fully secured because you sent the file to the bank. When you're on a particular record here, you can go into details, take a look. This shows you the vouchers and the checks that were in that file, and actually you can drill in and see the file itself. So positive pay, very straightforward, very easy to use, quite inexpensive. So it's a great solution to solve your check fraud prevention needs. All right, let's go back and take a look at the next module. So AP EFT funds transfer. There's a reason why these two are at the top. These are by far the most popular of the modules. Wire Transfer Plus we'll talk about takes payments a little bit further along. The bottom two options are related to AR. And we find that a lot more folks deal with the AP side of the house and GL and SL. There's a smaller community that deals with AR, but we cover both. So let's talk about AP EFT and what that's about. So again, this module is designed exclusively for the US NACHA standard, which many of you may be familiar with. Either if you're doing it now manually, I think if you're not using our product, you likely are going to a bank website, either keying in your ACH payments and pressing a button, and then those go out. But then, of course, you have to come back into SL and enter that data. What we're going to find with this module is you basically do all of that in your voucher entry, and then there's single data entry, and all the process takes place, similar to positive pay. We'll touch on that. So not only does it send out NACHA payments, but it also includes that transmission pieces I talked about, either browser or FTP, and then also a very, very robust email notification function, so that as you're sending payments to your vendors, they're very appreciative if they get an email letting them know what was paid, in fact. So if those of you that are considering APFT, this little write-up from Hersha Hospitality, we expect that 80% of our vendors will accept electronic transfers, improving their cash flow. After itemizing the cost to continue to print checks, which included $21,000 in postage alone, we found an annual savings of $64,000, 3-year savings of almost $200,000. So depending on the volume of checks you're printing, the APFT can be a nice cost reduction in your AP department. Let's walk through some of the features and we'll take a look at the product. So a little more technical on the ACH side. Within an ACH, there are different types of transactions. So this may be a little bit of an education seminar for some of you. So PPD stands for pre-authorization payment deposit, and it's used for paying individuals. So like your employee expense reimbursements, that kind of thing. A CCD is a cash concentration and disbursement, and that's utilized to pay your corporate entities. Very common if you're for your trading partners or anyone like that. CCD Plus is a little extension to CCD. Not only sends the payment information, but it adds an additional addenda record to allow information electronically to say what invoice is being paid. So that can be valuable, especially if your vendors are requesting that. The IAT format is an international ACH transaction. It was introduced a number of years ago. Can be used if your bank supports a gateway to send payments abroad. So this is an alternative to doing wires, which traditionally you had to do to pay outside the U.S. So the IAT transaction is also supported within the product. On top of that, the ACH system can be used to pay your federal and state tax payments, your 941s or any number of state taxes. So if that's a business requirement, the ACH module can handle that very nicely. In addition, child support payments can be done through this module. Again, these features are all included in the APFT module. As I mentioned, email remittance advices are available. They can be customized, so we have out-of-the-box standard layouts, but they can be fully customized to suit your needs. In addition, we can provide attachments that allow the remittance information to be included as an external file rather than being in the body of the email. So here's a sample of what an email might look like. You can configure all of this, the subject line at the top, the electronic payment piece, who it's from, the details of the payment, who we're paying, and then for each payment you can see the EFT amount and then actually the invoices that are being paid. So these, this is kind of the standard out of the box. If you're not using discounts, that can be easily removed so people don't get an idea that you don't want them to have. To take a discount. So all of this, again, is very available in the product. When you're doing electronic payments in SL, SL doesn't kind of know that much about electronic payments. You may be familiar that in the manual check screen or payment entry screen, there is an option to mark it as an electronic payment. I believe that came into being in SL 2011. So what you need to do is make sure that when you're running the processing, that you keep your EFT payments or wire payments, as we'll talk about in a bit, in a separate SL batch. If you think about it, you're going to go and print your checks to mail your checks if you're using checks. Those transactions in that SL payment batch have to be all SL checks. Your EFT payments have to be in a completely separate SL batch. So we have an option, as I'll demonstrate here in a second, where we take a payment selection, your normal payment selection, and then we can take any checks and move them into their batch, and we can take the EFTs and move them into their own batch, and that can be a manual check batch that's put on hold. I'll walk through this to make it a little more clear. Again, that we call that a manual check workflow, and that's the basic key piece of the architecture of the product to allow that splitting of the check batches and the EFT batches as well. We have a feature called Account Change Security. A number of years ago, we had an employee of one of the customers that had purchased the product that got pretty clever, fraudulently clever, and before the file was going out the door, they went into one of the vendors that was being paid and changed the transit routing and account number to their own account. They managed to pull off about $700,000 to a Caribbean account, which was unfortunate. They were, appropriately dealt with. But so we have a feature called account change security, whereas if the sensitive banking information and vendor banking details is modified, you have to have another different person in a security group that you've set up to be able to approve that change. If you don't do that, the file, you cannot create the file and send it out the door. So we call that account change security. In addition, we have a feature called amount security, and what that allows for, you can set up the option to say if the amount of the payments being made exceed a certain dollar amount, and we have a couple of levels. So an example might be anything over $5,000 or anything over $50,000. Let's take those two cases. It would require a certain set of individuals to enter a password prior to that going out the door. So we can kind of filter if you're running your normal batches and there's no checks in there for over $5,000, everything goes out without any requirement. As soon as we get a batch that's got a $6,000 check, now Sally or Jim have to go in and enter their own password in order to allow that to go out the door. We call that amount security. Again, browser or FTP uploads, much like Positive Pay. We create a file, and we need to get that file to the bank. So let me go over and take a look at how that looks in the product itself. Again, if there are questions as we go along, feel free to jump in. That'll be fine. So again, what I'm going to do is go enter a normal voucher. Actually, I have some queued up already. So in the accounts payable area, we've added a customization on this screen. And so what that is over here to the right, over here where you normally have your discount dates, we have what kind of an account this is and how we're going to pay that item. So I'm going to bring up Kim, who I've set up in the system. We'll talk about that. Kim only has one EFT account. In our version 10 of our software, we now have, for those of you using it, you probably are on version 9. You could be on version 10. But version 10 now allows multiple accounts by vendor. So that we had one large customer that had a number of contractors. It was a kind of a governmental agency, but they were paying many, many different contractors. And so they set up multiple accounts. Each contractor wanted to get their money in a different account. So we have the capability to do multiple accounts now. Within that, then we have how do they want to be paid. And in this case, we talked about those different things, PPD, et cetera. So in this case, we can then distinguish that. That's the only change here. The rest of the screen is identical. You enter your voucher, but now you can pay by PPD or you could default it to pay by check. So that's the start of the process. So I've already created some already. So the next step normally, as you know, would go to be payment selection. So I'm going to go into payment selection. This is probably very familiar to all of you. Go by reference number. I've done this prior to the demo. I've got a couple of vouchers here. One is going to be an EFT voucher, and one is going to be a check voucher. So I've got that. I'm going to begin processing. Nothing new here, right? This is your standard payment selection. Now we go over to the eBanking module, and there's this extra step that I talked about. And we call that a payment selection filter. Again, the purpose and goal of this filter is to take those checks and move them off into their own batch, and take the EFT payments or the ACH payments and move them off into their own separate batch. And we'll do that automatically for you. We come into the screen, we pull up the batch we just created, and you can see down here, the batch that we had just created through payment selection was 212. We're going to leave that batch intact, and that's going to have our computer checks. And we're going to create a new batch that's going to have the US ACH, and that's going to be a manual check batch. So as I begin processing, that's going to do that process. It finished. It's now going to tell us what the next step is, which I'll talk about. But so we've got this batch then intact, and we've now created a brand new batch, 213. This is done automatically. This would be similar, remember, for those of you that went to a bank website and now came back into AX and entered a manual check batch. We've actually created the manual check batch in advance. and we're going to use that to generate the payment. So it's a little bit of the reversal. This batch, though, is on hold, so the system right now doesn't, SL doesn't think that the payment's been made, and I'll walk through that process. From here, actually, I have a lookup. I can drill in and see that batch that we just created. So this is a manual check batch. Again, it's noted as electronic payment. It's all set up to pay that $100 voucher. And you'll notice even the check numbering. We can, with our module, we can actually put an alpha character in front of the reference number, so you can distinguish your electronic payments from your check payments. So when you look into history within SL, you'll see that that distinction. Notice that this is on hold, so we put it here on hold. You could delete it here if there's a mistake or anything, but we'll go to the next step. So this is that critical piece. This is the piece that you jump in to do the split. And then the final step is just like Positive Pay. We're now going to create the file and send it to the bank, and we'll walk through how we do that. So on this screen, we have, again, like Positive Pay, these are the ACH files we've sent to the bank. You can see over here we've actually got the format. This is shared with our wire transfer area, so if we had wire formats, we'll talk about that in a minute. So from here, I'm going to say new eBanking file again, just like I did before. It automatically checks this manual check batch. Is there a question? Okay, I thought I heard someone. So at this point, we just simply check it off. Now it's put that, it's got a pending file, this banking file number 13. Just like Positive Pay, we click a button. As simple as that, this now has gone off and created an ACH file. In this case, we're sending it off. I think this is going to be Bank of America. Yep. So in this case, you have a browser to go and upload it to your Bank of America payment area. And again, much like Positive Pay, at the end, there's a complete process. And now what's going to happen is there's going to be a couple steps. That manual check batch that we had, now that we've successfully sent it to the bank, now we're going to release that manual check batch. So it's very nice in the fact that you're not getting things out of order. You don't want to release a manual check batch until you're certain that the ACH process has gone through. So this is how you manage that process. And so it's going to release it. In this case, there's one that could have been multiple batches. At the same time, it's now going to be doing our archiving and purging. And then it's also sending the emails out. So it did that email process at the end, just as we talked about. It says that it sent one email and failed, so it gives you a status here. There's actually an email log that's written that you can monitor that. So then we have the history of it here, just like Positive Pay. We can click on details. We can see the check and the voucher that was paid, and we can actually go and see the ACH file that was created in the background. Those of you familiar with ACH files, sometimes you'll notice that the bank requires a header record for authentication. This is done through our header trailer maintenance. So, and this is block filling at the bottom. I just saw something on the partner forum where there was a question about BB&T Bank requiring block filling. So again, we handle all those little nuances that are particular to electronic banking, whether it's header trailer, block filling, pre-notes, balanced, unbalanced files, etc. So that's the flow. Again, create your voucher, designate how you want someone to be paid, do payment selection as normal. You might pay 500 vouchers a week, and 200 are checks and 300 are ACH. It'll split it into two batches. You take your checks and print your checks and go, and your ACHs after the payment selection filter come in here, select that batch, and push the ACH file out the door. Then it releases the manual check batch, and at the same time prints your, sends out your emails. I'm going to go take a look at the vendor banking entry where you add the vendor detail information. If there is a question, feel free to pop in at any time here. So here I have Kim's record, as I mentioned. What you get here in this screen is we add information on top of what you have in SL. So in SL, you've got tens and tens of vendors. We then take those vendors and we add additional banking information. So this screen is kind of an addendum to your normal vendor screen. From here is where you manage the format that's appropriate for that vendor. You manage what the default method of entry class or payment. This is where you enter the transit routing and account number, that kind of thing. Again, if there's account approval, that's managed here as well, as I talked about. Also here you manage the email area. So this is where you set up. You can actually inherit the email from SL, from the standard email that's there, or you can add up to 3 additional emails as well. So that's all there is. This is a one-time setup per vendor. Once you've done it, you can leave it alone, and then everything else is automatic. Just voucher entry process as we showed. All right. Any questions on in this area at all? All right. Swimming right along here at a nice pace. So let's go to the third module, Wire Transfer Plus. And actually, if you've absorbed everything on the AP/EFT, the Wire Transfer Plus is going to be a baby step beyond that. So this module, as you can gather from the word plus, does more than just wire transfers. The way that electronic data is sent in the U.S. is that the ACH network is shared by all the banks, and it's a very low-cost way to make electronic payments. Those payments can be done generally guaranteed within 48 hours, and typically it's about 10 cents a transaction to make an ACH payment. You all are probably very familiar with wires. Wires go much quicker. They go through the Federal Reserve System, not the NACHA system. They are generally committed within 6 hours, but as you know, they incur a much higher fee, generally in the $10, $20, $30, $40 range. So wires are a different animal, and so we have this different module that we use for that in particular. Also, this module can handle outsourced checks. So some of you may have decided we no longer want to print and mail our checks, but our bank has a service that we can send them a file, and they'll do all that for us. They'll print the checks, they'll stuff the checks, they'll mail the checks, and actually they'll do the positive pay since they're the ones that created the checks. So this module would be used for that. So you can, for instance, Wells Fargo is well known for that. Payment Manager Service, many other, Chase, Bank of America, Citi, all generally have this outsourced check printing option. P-cards, if you need to fund a P-card, if you have a corporate credit card and that needs to be funded, of course, generally there's a different format for that. It could be as simple as an ACH. In addition, there's a new kind of functionality that banks have, which we call virtual pay. I don't even have it listed on here, but that's where you send a file to the bank. Comdata is one of those kind of cases. That's kind of a trade name on this, but many banks have a thing called virtual pay, where you send a file to the bank, and they've recruited your vendors. They sign their vendors up on a portal, and they encourage them to sign up, and then they can manage how they want to get the money. You send them a file with the details of the invoices and the payments that you're willing to pay them. And what they do is they create a temporary credit card and have the vendor get paid off of that credit card. They encourage them to do it, and then they get their money at a little discount, but because of the ease of use for them. So then if you think about it, when you use a credit card on your side to make payments, you get a rewards program. And so with this virtual pay, the same thing occurs. The bank will do this for you, and because they do it, then you get a spiff actually yearly. So if you're spending $10, $20, $15 million to your vendors, you might get $20,000 or $30,000 spiff back from the bank, which can help fund your AP department. So AP department could be a cost center, actually a profit center. It's always a cost center, but it could be a profit center if you're using this virtual pay functionality. You might want to inquire with your bank. Again, Wire Transfer Plus can create those type of files to go to the bank. Again, the bank communication, just like AP/EFT, and the email functionality exactly as well. So on our website, we have an area where you can go to look at the formats, the various formats.
What exactly?
Unlike ACH, which is a standard, each bank will have very different formats, as you can see on the screen. Again, on our website, you can see these, but they're all different kinds of platforms and the different kinds of things they can do. So they can do, U.S. transfers, international wires, virtually any kind of electronic payment. If you need it, the Wire Transfer Plus module can handle that for you. This is a little more complex, so if you have this requirement, please be in touch with us and or through SSI. We need to look at the format and determine what's the best solution for you. But again, that's what this module is for. Again, the process flow, just like I showed with AP/EFT, I'll briefly demonstrate it, but it's very, very similar. Again, as I mentioned, the wires are processed by the Federal Reserve versus the NACHA system. Email remittance advices and attachments identical to APFT. It can be customized. The formats are plug-in. So again, if we do not have a format, we can create it for you. Typically, there's some small charge for that. These are much more complex pieces of software. They require 1 or 2 or 3 days to create, unlike a positive pay format. As I mentioned, these are the different areas that it can deal with. Again, it has the same functionality in terms of account change security and amount approval security, just as I talked about before. And again, browser and FTP. So as you can see, this is really a sister module to the AP one. Again, the APFT handles USACH. Wire transfer does everything else, anything that's not USACH. Let's go over and take a look at how that looks. And so what I'm going to do is go back to vendor banking entry. This is the most distinguished part of the module in terms of change. So when I bring up this PV list, you can see I've got different vendors that their format is USACH, but I have some that are set up with this other format. So let's take a look at PLAR. So again, this is a Bank of America flat file format. It's a very particular format. And in it, it can support different kinds of things, different options. It can do a FedWire, SwiftWire. This is a commercial check. This is that outsourced check printing I was talking about. Actually, within it, you can actually do a CCD in that same file as well. So there are some cases where if you need ACH and you need wires, you can actually just purchase Wire Transfer Plus and get the benefit of both. Again, this screen now has both information for ACH, but then it gets a little more sophisticated and can bring in information related to wires. So if you have a Swift account, you can enter the Swift number and an IBAN number if you're doing international payments. Email piece is identical. This is turned off here. You can enable it. You can have options there. And then on the wire transfer area, as you may be familiar, those of you that do wires know there's can be considerable amount more of information. They need beneficiary name and address, may need beneficiary bank information, may need intermediary bank, credit party information, then bank instructions or payment instructions. So again, these fields are all designed to incorporate all the features you need to do process your payments. There are some custom fields that can be exposed here automatically if you have repetitive wires or templated wires, all different kinds of features there. Again, with our about 1,300 customers around the world, we've hit pretty much most of the scenarios that most of you may encounter. So if there are any questions, feel free to pop in. I'm going to show the file formats over here as well. So again, this is a list of the Wire Plus formats. And so if I go to this Bank of America BAFF, we drill down, and then for each format, there are different transaction types or payment types that are related to the format. Again, this can be specific to your business, what's required, and as you can see here, this particular format, there are many different ways or things that you may need to do in terms of different kinds of check types and different kind of deliveries overnight back to the vendor. If you want to get the check FedEx back to you, an employee check, FedWire, SwiftWire, a high-value international wire, etc. All these are, when we do a format, we provide these pay codes or entry types along with it. This needs to accommodate whatever your business requirement is. The rest of the process is identical. You go to voucher entry, and again, when you select that vendor, let me just go in there. If I select that vendor, it's going to bring in that type of payment. So I come over here and enter PLAR, and you can see now PLAR is going to get paid by FedWire, but I could change it. Say PLAR was in the office, I could change and pay PLAR by a check if she wanted to have a check while she left the office. So again, you can lock this down and make it disabled by vendor so your voucher entry clerks can't control that, or you can open it up and allow it to be selected individual item by individual item. And so this process, I won't even go through it. It's identical. You create the voucher, do your payment selection just as you normally would. Then you go through that payment selection filter. And again, we're going to filter out So if you have a more complex environment where you have checks and you have ACHs and you have wires, our filter would actually create 3 batches, because each batch has to have a separate format. One batch is going to be for printing checks, the next batch is for printing ACHs, and the next batch is going to be print your wires. Again, different formats. The bank, we have to put them into separate files. So that's the Wire Transfer Plus area of the product. And that covers our AP side of the house. Now we'll jump over to AR, those of you that use AR processing. And so AR EFT is just the mirror image of AP EFT. So they're both ACH related modules, and this allows you to actually do a draft against your customer's account and pull the money into your account. So this is good if you have that business relationship with your customers. You know, a lot of customers aren't going to be happy about you taking money from them to pay yourself. But in many kinds of industries and any kind of business situations, that's a very acceptable model. And your customers may appreciate that. They don't have to go and mail you a check. You can just go in and draft their account, much like most of us pay our mortgage, where the bank drafts our bank account and pays the mortgage. This is the exact same thing, and that's done with an ACH as well. Features is exactly, as I said, a mirror. With this is a little more restrictive. We can do reverse wires, or we can do in Europe what's called direct debit, but typically it's mostly done with ACH, PPD, and CCD. The way we manage it is on the terms code on the invoice in AR. So you can set up a terms code that you are going to designate as EFT collection terms, and then the process runs from that. So that way we know which invoices to try to collect electronically. And so when you go into the create and send area, we go and auto-select based on that terms code. And then after we send the file to the bank then gets the file, pulls the money from the customer account, deposits in your account, and then we do, as part of AR EFT, we do the payment application batch automatically at the end of that process. So that effectively does the application of that payment against your existing invoices to close the loop. Like AP EFT, we have email remittance advices managed. So we send out email remittance to your customer saying, happy day, we just pulled money from your account, and lets them know the invoices that they just paid you. Again, browser FTP uploads, very, very similar as before. This is going to look very similar. The slight difference, of course, what we have is that we have to manage customers, not vendors. So we have another option called customer banking entry. Customer banking entry, we're going to be accessing the customer master. So very, very similar. So we're going after the customer master. And again, we say it's a PPD, and this is basically the customer's transit routing and account number that we're going to pull money from. We're going to pull that money from them. There's no AP voucher entry. There's the normal invoice entry in AR, but then we have a different process for AR, and there's no filtering required like payment in the AP side. So over on AR, we simply come in here, and if we create a new file, then what we do is we go and select new invoices and view invoices related. These are batches. These are invoice batches, and we're going to go within that batch and go and select the various invoices that we want to pay electronically. So we have the terms code. In this case, I've got it set up with EF, and we're going to go and collect the discount, the EFT amount. We're going to collect $100 from here, and this is apparently the balance, so we're going to collect $50 more. We simply select those, come back here, and we would check off this item. I'm not going to do it right here, but then once we checked it off, we do the exact same process. It's going to create the file, send it to the bank. The bank is going to pull the money from the customer for those invoices, put it into your account. We send an email off to the customer saying we just pulled money from your account. Thank you very much. So that's the AR EFT, again, exact mirror of the AP side. Let's go to our final module called lockbox processing. So if you have a traditional lockbox, this is fantastic. You know, a lockbox is where the bank manages a mailbox. You have all your customers send their checks to that mailbox. The bank goes to that mailbox whenever frequency you and they have determined. They take those checks, they deposit them, and then they create an electronic file and send that to you. And the beauty of this module is if you have a high volume of these, this can be hugely valuable to bring that file in and automatically settle those invoices. Again, the goal is to at least put the money on account. The best, of course, is to actually do payment application against an invoice. So it's good for high volume. If you have 10 checks a day, probably not worth it. But if you have 50, 100, whatever, could be very, very valuable to you. We have some bringing in thousands of invoices on a weekly basis. The product does this auto invoice application. So the goal, of course, is to find the customer and the invoice from that data and do the application. We put the data into a workbench, as I'll show in a minute, to refine the settlements. We can do split payments. So sometimes you may get a check that's from a holding company. So say you get a check from Walmart Holding Company, and they're on there, they've got invoices that are paying Walmart A, Walmart B, Walmart C, and each of those invoices are for separate customers in your SL system. We can take that check and we can actually split it into 3 pieces based on the value of those invoices that they're paying. We can do that all automatically for you. We can accept discounts and credit memo support. If we find the credit memo in SL, we can actually settle that credit memo. We can deal with non-lockbox files. So we've been talking about a traditional lockbox, but all that we need is an invoice number in the amount to apply and maybe a reference number like a check number. So if you have volumes of information coming in, whether you don't even have a lockbox, maybe you just got a stack of checks on your desk, you could go through very easily and just key in the invoice number and key in the amount to apply and a reference number in a spreadsheet, 3 columns, save that as a CSV file and use this process to do the automating that whole process. So it does not have to be a traditional lockbox file. It can be any electronic file, a CSV file, a comma delimited file that you've created one way or another. I mean, you may have an e-commerce site that's getting credit card payments, and that can create some kind of a file that we can import as well. So that can be used. Again, the BAI2 file is very common in the U.S. for lockboxes, but also fixed field and comma delimited. We have a screen that you can actually configure those just with a few mouse clicks. So field number 1 is a check number, field number 2 is an invoice number, field number 3 is an invoice amount to apply. In 5 minutes, you can create that layout. We handle centralized cash, much like SL does. In terms of a payment coming in, paying invoices that are across different companies, you can take that payment and we put it in. And when we do the release and do a payment application batch, then it automatically does the due to, due from on the different companies. And in multi-currency as well, if there's a payment coming in and the invoices are in different currencies, we can deal with that issue as well. Let's take a look at what it looks like a bit. We'll take a look at the formats again. The formats very configurable here, so we can handle the BAI2, or if it's a comma delimited here, you can just configure it, as I mentioned, or fixed field, start and end position. So this screen is available to configure those formats for you, or if it's a standard one. And then the lockbox processing occurs in this AR area, as you'd imagine. So here you have a lockbox tab. Again, you can go and download, retrieve the files from the bank. Somehow you need to get the file into the system. It can be just dropped on a network share, and then you can pick it up. And then from here, you can import the file. Over here you can import the file. This has the download area, but you can just check off a file to import it and then hit import. I think I've already done that, so I'm not going to do it here. These are the workbenches that are created when you import the file. You go into the workbench and take a look at the data that's there. In this case, it's a very simplified one. The top of the grid is where you have good transactions that have come in and we've done the settlements and we've seen the applications. So I can drill in and see the application. Looks like the data is not so hot here. Let me see if I've got another batch that's a little better. Apologize. So here we have got a little more data, some good information, then we've got some errors at the bottom. But we can drill in here and take a look at the application of that, and we can see that how we applied that against different invoices. So the top is a payment, and the applications are the various invoices. At the bottom, this invoice number came in. We could not find it, so it put it in the errors grid. This is where we would do some research, and we can do a lookup on customer and try to figure out what customer that is. There's an option here to be able to actually look inside the file. So we can actually look inside, and here we can see that there's not enough good information. Sometimes you'll find the customer name in here, but there may be other information that's valuable. And then we have also a sophisticated lookup option here that you can actually review many different views here that you can drill in by invoice number, by invoice balance. You can drill down. The idea, of course, is to do the research to locate the invoice to apply to, bring it back here, and then move it up to the good grid. The last process after you have these resolved in this workbench is to create an AR batch over here, and this sends it over to create an AR payment batch, and it does the payment application for you. So again, the process is to bring a file in, have the system automatically apply the cash against invoices. Things that are in errors or unresolved are in this errors grid, and you use different tools to find the appropriate place to settle it, bring it back up here to the good grid, and then finally create your AR payment application batch. So that covers the modules I wanted to touch on. I have a kind of a wrap-up slide here before we open it up for general questions in terms of pricing, etc. So this module we sell exclusively through your SL reseller, so SSI would be contacted in order to get a pricing on the product. And as I mentioned, these modules are purchased a la carte. So if you only want APFT, you only have to purchase that. There is an advantage, however, to purchase multiple modules at the same time. So if Positive Pay and APFT look like a good mix because you do checks and you want ACH, then please encourage you to purchase them at the same time to get the 15% discount. If you got 4 or 5 of the modules, you get then a 20% discount. We're very current on all the SL products. We just tested on SL 2011 FP SP3, which just came out, I guess, a couple of weeks ago, so we're very current on that. 2015 CU1 is fully vetted as well. We go back to SL7 and 6.5. Typically, we try to get at least within 30 days of the release of an SL release to make sure that we've walked the product through its paces. Again, I encourage you to go to www.sksoft.com, our website, demo videos there that rehash much of what I've talked about here. Also, there are data sheets available as well, and more information about our formats, etc. So that's what I had to cover today, and I'm going to now turn it back over to SSI folks for any wrap-up or to manage any questions you might have.
Great. Thanks so much, Tim. That was a great presentation, and I hope everyone found it helpful. We want to open it up now for any questions you may have on any of the products Tim showed you today or anything related to e-banking. I don't see that anyone's entered any in the chat box, but please feel free to give us your questions now.
Michelle and Tim, this is Patrick. I have one question. It's how would we learn more about virtual pay? Should we contact our bank, or what would be the best way to go about that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Patrick. So definitely contact your bank. If you have a particular bank you're working with, feel free to contact us, and we may know the name, the kind of the buzzword to use, because if you talk to them, virtual pay is a concept we put kind of in general around it. So in each bank, they have their own name about it. So maybe the first thing, contact us, and then we could maybe guide you in terms of what name. But then you'll need to actually talk to them and start that engagement with your bank.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Did anyone else have any other questions or comments or anything we can help you with? Patrick, did you see any others come in your way?
We have no other questions that have come in on my end. Let's see, maybe, give me just a second. Here's one more. Is there training on the SandlerCon website? Available training?
Yeah, not per se. Again, The SSI folks have a lot of experience with this product, and so I'm sure they'd be glad to help you out. But we don't have, I think you're probably looking for some free help. Having said that, there's help system available within the product, so if I'm on any screen, again, you can get a copy of the software that for no charge. That's a demo copy. Allows you to play with it. Let me see if I can get my help to come up. So there is detailed help. So for, say, for APFT, there's a user guide. Talks about getting started. You can see and walks through the different steps of setup, et cetera. And then for each of the areas, there's detailed screenshots and walkthroughs of all of that. So there's a lot of information here that is available as well. Of course, SSI is a great resource for that too.
Yes, I will just add that our team members have been working with these modules for many years, so we are always happy to come on site or do some web training, whatever would work best for you. I think we'll just give a few more minutes, and if anyone has any questions, please feel free. As I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, we will be sending a copy of it out to all of you, everyone who registered, along with our contact information, and just, please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions, if you'd like some pricing information, and please feel free to reach out to myself, Michelle, or to Marion, and we're happy to help you with it. Okay, well, I think...
hold on, Michelle. We actually have one more question I'd like to ask.
Okay, great.
Tim, does this software work with all major banks? They're currently using BB&T and want to make sure that it would work well with Sanacon.
Sure, that's a great question. Yes, so the ACH system is prevalent throughout the U.S. There's kind of a flavor of it for Canada. And every bank, we've not ever encountered a bank that we cannot work with. So if you're doing ACH, very straightforward. With, again, Wire Transfer Plus, things are bank specific. Again, let me just go over to our website, which you're certainly welcome to go to, and you can see in terms of, if I go to sksoft.com, under products, and you go to Wire Transfer Plus here on the menu, if you go over here to the formats, you'll be able to see the different formats we have for the different banks. So let's just see if BB&T pops up, and there they are. So again, there's an EDI 820 that they have to do outsourced check printing and CCD Plus, and that's currently in our library. Again, even if you don't see your bank here, we've not encountered a bank that we have not been able to deal with. So don't let that deter you. Certainly inquire, and we'll take it to the next step. And again, ACH, if that's what you're looking for the APFT, that's every bank in the U.S. Handles that. And our screens are all configurable, so you go in and just enter the data. It's not like you have to do any custom programming or anything around the format. So, and I think then even over on the positive pay side, if you're dealing with checks with BB&T, again, this area, you go to the right side here and you can get the formats. And I'm pretty sure we have BB&T here. Here it is here. So we have the positive pay format for BB&T.
Thank you, Tim.
Yep.
Yeah, Tim, I got one more question for you. Is this the presentation going to be emailed to us? Yes. We'll be sending out a link to a recorded version of this webinar along with the presentation PowerPoint. So that'll be in your inbox later today or tomorrow. Thank you, Rich.
Okay. Any other questions out there, Patrick?
Not yet. No, the box is open if anybody has any.
Okay, last call for questions. Okay, well, I think we'll wrap it up there then if there's no other questions. And thank you, Tim, from SK Global for your presentation today. I hope that everyone who attended found it helpful.
It was my pleasure, Michelle, and feel free to be in touch with SSI, and if they can't handle a question, I'm sure they'll pass it over to us. Look forward to talking to any of you that might be interested.
Yes, look for an email from Patrick with a link to this presentation, and please feel free to reach out to us with any questions or if you'd like to see more information. Thanks, everyone, for joining, and have a great day.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good day, everybody.